Get real. At this point, a lot of people are going to have a nasty wake-up call. Previously, I talked about identifying your life's objective. This is a very exhilarating process because, as I've mentioned previously, it's too easy to live your life like a lost person. You think you have a purpose. You think you are trying hard. You are being a mature and responsible adult. But it turns out that despite how hard you try and how much you plan and how seemingly focused you are, you end up going around in circles. This, of course, is due to the fact that you don't really have a grand objective. Previously, you zeroed in on the grand objective of your life. You zeroed in on what you want your life to produce. Think of it this way. When people show up at your funeral and they see your body in a box, what would you want people to think about the life you lived? Would you like them to say that he or she was a kind person, or he or she helped a lot of people, or he or she revolutionized the world or discovered something? Think about those things. This should form your grand objective because you're using other people's impressions of you as some sort of an objective mirror for what you think you want for yourself. Now, if that seems clear enough, here's a monkey wrench. You have to ask yourself, are my grand objectives really mine? I know this seems kind of a bit of a letdown because, after all, previously, we talked about the great revelation of your life's meaning or central focus. However, we can't do this blindly. We can't just say, because I do have this grand objective, then that's all I need to focus on. Well, there's another level of analysis. You have to ask yourself, is it really mine, or did I just pick it up from somebody else? This is not an easy process to go through. It actually requires some preliminary steps. Do a memory detox. A lot of people think they have grand objectives because they have certain memories of the past that lead to these objectives. Maybe you remember telling your mom that when you grow up, you'll be an attorney, a doctor, or a politician. Maybe you told your dad that when you become a grown-up, you'll be a professional athlete. These are heartwarming when people say them now, but are they based on the truth? Do a memory detox. In other words, when you say your grand objective to yourself, think of past memories that this triggers. Zero in on one memory and ask yourself, did this really happen? Now, if the answer is yes, you're going to analyze it some more. But if the answer is no, then you need to start having second thoughts about your grand objective. This might be an assumed memory. You don't want to build a house on a foundation of sand. Now, assuming that memory is actually based on facts and things did happen, ask yourself, am I exaggerating things? You have to remember that people say stuff all the time, but what we choose to remember might actually be quite different from what actually took place. Ask yourself, do I remember this correctly, or is this exaggerated? Am I blowing things out of proportion? Again, if this is the case, then you need to be suspicious of your grand objective. It might be based on fiction or exaggeration. Neither of these is good. If it isn't exaggerated, ask yourself if there are missing pieces of the memory. If this is the case, then be very suspicious. You might be filling in the memories to produce a certain mental state that you are looking for. This usually happens in cases of abuse. Whether mental or physical, they kind of work the same. It was so traumatic that you only remember in fragments. You have to detoxify your memory. Finally, if your memory is based on fact, ask yourself, is this the only interpretation? Are there any other grand objectives I can derive from this memory? Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you are not entitled to your personal grand objective. I'm not trying to rob you of your big dreams. However, all I'm doing is walking you through the process of realizing what your grand objectives rest on. Are they real memories, or are you exaggerating them? Are you filling stuff in, or are you just interpreting them to lead to a certain outcome? Just be aware of how this plays out, so you end up totally owning your life's grand objectives. You start seeing it with your plain eyes. You don't choose to filter it with rose-colored glasses. Do an attitude detox. Memory is one thing. Attitude is another. Believe it or not, your attitude plays a big role in how your life turns out. If your attitude is that of a victim, then you find yourself feeling small, stuck, powerless. Worse yet, you feel that you are life's martyr. Everybody takes turns victimizing you. You feel disrespected, and deep down you don't really feel worthy of respect. The worst part of all this is you feel like some sort of victim. It's too easy to excuse yourself to be really harsh or even cruel to other people. After all, if you're hurting so badly, it's too easy to get numb to the pain so that you lose sight of the pain you, yourself, dish out. Try to explain your attitude to yourself. Given what's happening in your life, are there any other ways to interpret what's going on? For example, if you think your job is a daily humiliation where you clock in, spend 8 hours, and then clock out, ask yourself, is this the only way to look at this situation? My job does give me a paycheck. I do hang around with interesting people. I do get to use my muscles or my brain for work. Obviously, it's interesting enough, otherwise I would have quit a long time ago. Ask yourself, is the way I'm looking at this part of my life the most optimal one? This is really an indirect way of asking yourself, what is my attitude? The problem with attitude is sometimes they're like sunglasses that we put on and we forget that we have them on. Everywhere you turn seems like everything is a little dark. But it turns out things look that way because you have your mindset sunglasses on. Your attitude works the same way. You might think that you're just perceiving your reality or living your life and everything is objectively neutral. No, they're not. Everything you perceive from the outside world is filtered through the prism or lens of your attitude. Believe it or not, if you change your attitude, the world's appearance and your perception of your world starts to change. You can either look at the end of the tunnel as the beginning of freedom, or you could look at that light at the end of the tunnel as a train headed your way. These are two totally different things, courtesy of differences in attitude. I need you to do an attitude detox. I want you to take off your lens or filter and look at what's going on in your life in the most objective way possible. Is it really that bad? Are your relationships really that poisonous? Is your childhood really that messed up? Oftentimes, the limitations that we feel hold us back and drag us down are actually chosen. They're not chosen by other people, mind you. You chose them. You wear those invisible shackles by choice. Reclaim your power to choose. You have to understand that your life is a choice. I hate to break it to you. The way you dress, even your IQ, how much money you have in the bank, how good you look, the style of your hair, the size of your car, the size of your house, whether you rent or own a house, and all the other details of your life, all those are choices. A lot of people would have a problem with this. After all, who in their right mind would choose to be poor, oppressed, or burdened? Who in their right mind would choose to live a life of powerlessness and limited choices? Well, these are illusions. Ultimately, your external life, I'm talking about things that people can readily observe, is a product of your internal choices. If you start choosing internal realities differently, sooner or later they will bubble up to the surface. It's not going to happen overnight, but these changes are undeniable as long as they're consistent. As long as your mind has totally shifted direction, sooner or later your thoughts will be manifest in the reality you live. You start dressing differently. You start talking about different things. You start expressing a different kind of attitude. Sooner or later, you start behaving differently. As I keep saying throughout all my trainings, the world doesn't care about your feelings. It really doesn't care at all about your emotions. The world doesn't care that you have certain emotional issues, and that's why you're 50 pounds overweight. All the world sees is that you have extra weight. The world doesn't know nor care that you are scared of certain things, and that's why you have the job that you have, and it pays very little. All it sees is a person making very little money. That's why it's really important to reclaim your power to choose, because ultimately, if you want your life to change and produce certain outcomes, these will all flow from your internal choices. This is why it's really important to make those internal choices. There are only really 3 questions that you need to wrap your mind around. What are your ideals? What are your values? Does everything line up? Only you can answer these questions. Everybody is different. Some people are content with a few bucks and food on the table. Other people want to travel. They want to learn all they can learn. They want to experience the very best that life has to offer. Others like challenges. They like adventure. They like to discover new worlds. Again, everybody is different. But what's important is that you are mindful of what you want for yourself. What's important is that you have a clear idea of what your purpose is. Unfortunately, when you think that you have a grand objective, chances are you picked this up somewhere. It's not unusual for children to live the lives of their parents. It's not unusual for children to inherit the conflicts and frustrated ambitions of their parents. I'm telling you, life is too short for that. You shouldn't live your life for your parents. You should live your life for yourself. They had their chance. Let that go. Focus on what makes sense to you. This is your purpose. You have all these deadlines and big projects that need to be completed. Unfortunately, the more you complete them, the thicker the fog. Eventually, it starts to dawn on you that what you're doing is pointless. It doesn't matter how mission critical a project is. It doesn't matter how much money you will make with the project. You still end up in the same place. When you live with purpose, all this fog clears up and you see that straight line to where you'd like to go. Similarly, purpose flows from integrity. Integrity is one word you don't hear much nowadays. Usually when people use the word integrity, they often talk about the ability to tell the truth. They talk about living life with character. Well, that's important and everything. I use the word integrity in a very limited sense. When you live with integrity, you focus like a laser on the outcomes you would like for your life and you act accordingly. Everything you do leads to that outcome. That is a life of integrity because your actions line up with your ideals, your values, and your grand objectives. Believe it or not, living life with integrity and prizing integrity leads to a real life. You feel like your actions have consequences. You feel that every moment that you waste chasing your tail has a consequence, and just like having some sort of personal GPS, you keep getting redirected to where you need to go. Each step that you take has more meaning. It's not just something that you do as part of the course. You don't feel like you're just going through the motions. In fact, if you become so disciplined, every breath you take feels like an opportunity and a blessing at the same time. That's the power of a life of integrity, flowing from purpose. Get quiet. What if I told you that you're always interrupting yourself? What if I told you that you have a conscious goal and a subconscious mind? What if you get your wires crossed? What if you think you are pursuing certain goals and end up sabotaging yourself or undermining yourself? This actually happens quite a bit. People think that they are being focused, that they have a set goal in mind, that they are doing things intentionally. Unfortunately, for the life of them, nothing seems to work. They think that they're going through the right process and they're focusing on the right things, but regardless of how much time, effort, and energy they put in, they keep tripping up. Things take a lot longer. They make serious mistakes. It takes a lot more effort. In many cases, they end up in a far worse spot than when they started. What's going on? Well, it boils down to people interrupting themselves. They can't help it. They feel that they just go through their thought process in an automatic or semi-automatic way only to produce the same results each and every time. To break free of this, you only need to do one thing. Get quiet. I know it sounds simplistic. A lot of people will quickly dismiss this idea, but the truth is if you get quiet first, a lot of the things that you're struggling with become easier. You start getting a big picture view of what it is you're doing despite your conscious goals and objectives. You put yourself in a position where it becomes easier for you to take action that will finally get you out of the tough spot you're in. It all boils down to deciding to get quiet first. Stop editing your thoughts. One common way people trip themselves up and interrupt their ability to focus so clearly that they turn their thoughts into reality involves editing. Believe it or not, you're constantly editing your thoughts. Maybe this is due to other people's expectations of you. Perhaps you're thinking of thoughts that you think you shouldn't be thinking. Possibly you are willfully trying to impose a certain interpretation on your thoughts. Whatever the case may be, you're engaged in one form of editing or another. Stop it. Your first goal should be to think as clearly as possible. You don't really know what your real thoughts are when you're always editing them. How can you get a clear understanding of your mental processes when you can't even bring yourself to admit the raw, uncut, unfiltered version of your thoughts? You quickly realize that there's really nothing to apologize for. Sure, you may be thinking about really horrible stuff. This stuff might even be embarrassing or trigger some sort of guilt from the past. But they're your thoughts. Nobody can see them. They only exist in your mind. Let them flow. Stop trying to filter them. Stop trying to warp, distort, or somehow control them. Instead, focus on clarity. What exactly are you thinking? It may be scary at first, but that's a small price to pay for the power that will arise from clarity. Choose to be clear first. Stop editing your thoughts. Stop editing your feelings. When your thoughts flash in your mind, it's too easy to try to impose some sort of meaning into them. In other words, it's too tempting to analyze them as they materialize. The reason people do this is because thoughts are never emotionally neutral. Once a thought appears in your mind, it triggers a range of emotions. This can be positive or negative, but there are always feelings involved. It is no surprise that once people perceive some sort of mental image, they quickly jump to the feelings that they're getting, and guess what? They try to control those feelings. It's like when you're walking through a mall holding hands with your kid and you see another person. Your kid starts to laugh and you turn around and tell your kid not to laugh. That's what you're doing with your feelings. You perceive certain things in your mind and you know that you have developed an emotional reaction, so you try to stop or edit that feeling. Either you're trying to cut it out altogether or reshape it to something more acceptable or something more expected. This is a problem because when you do that, you're not being honest. If a certain mental image flashes in your mind or a certain memory appears in your head, let the emotions come. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. There's nothing to apologize for. These are your emotions. Again, your first objective is to be as clear as possible regarding what you're feeling. Later on, you can work on implications. You can work on focusing on what this all leads to, as well as lining these up with your grand life objectives. Watch your thoughts like clouds. One of the best ways to get quiet on different levels is to simply watch your thoughts like clouds. Here's how you do it. Find a dark room. Make sure that you won't be interrupted for at least 15 minutes. Close your eyes and slowly breathe in and out deeply. After about 3 to 5 repetitions, you should be feeling relaxed. Next, focus your mind's eye on the thoughts appearing in your mind. Once the images appear, do not interpret them, do not analyze them, just watch them. This means you're going to acknowledge them, but you're not going to judge them. These are two totally different things. For example, when you were a kid in elementary school, maybe you got abused by bullies. Perhaps there was a guy named Jeff who was really harsh on you, and for the longest time, you always remember Jeff and you feel really, really negative, angry, upset, powerless when the mental image of Jeff appears in your mind. When you watch your thoughts like clouds, you let Jeff's image appear, just like a cloud overhead. But instead of allowing yourself to instantly feel angry, upset, or feel powerless and weak, you let Jeff's image come. You acknowledge to yourself that is Jeff from junior high. Notice how neutral that statement is? You don't follow it up with, that was my oppressor in junior high. That is the guy who stole my childhood. That is the guy who makes me feel so weak and impotent to this very day. You don't say any of that. Instead, you just say, that's Jeff. When you do that, you take ownership of the memory. This actually happened. This is part of you whether you like it or not. Most importantly, you don't impose any judgment on him. Just like a cloud passing by, it's neither good nor bad. It's just passing by. Let it pass through. When you do this, you take power over your mental state. You then count your breath and you repeat the process with another memory. This way, with enough repetition, your memories no longer have a negative hold on you. You no longer feel triggered so that you respond in a very negative emotional way. You feel in control. It's not like you're denying these memories or sweeping them under the rug. You accept them. They actually happen, but you let them pass. Sooner or later, it dawns on you that these negative memories that you did not choose, by the way, don't have to have a hold on you. They don't have to bring out the very worst in you. Instead, just like clouds, they appear and then they disappear and pass on. Sooner or later, if you keep repeating this and you plug into the quiet calm made possible by your breathing exercise, you start having a more productive relationship with your past as well as your future. How come? Well, you can also effectively deal with your worries about the future using the technique above. It all boils down to saving the eternal moment. When you focus on the present moment right here, right now, you get power because in this very second, you don't have to do things the same way you've always done them. You don't have to feel sad when the mental image of your father who broke a broom on your back when you were a kid flashes into mind. You just say, that's my dad. You don't have to step into a rabbit hole of rage when the picture of your mom who slapped you in front of a lot of people when you were all of 5 years old flashes in your mind. You just say, that's my mom. Do you see how this works? That's the power of the eternal moment because the eternal moment gives you choice. Finally, if you keep repeating this process, you stop chasing after answers. You stop asking, why? Why me? Of all the kids, why did I have to live that life? And other related questions. Once you stop chasing after the answers and you practice getting quiet, you quickly realize that the answers come to you instead. Refocus. Practice mindfulness to reclaim your power of focus. The reason you're feeling stuck, powerless, weak, and confused is because your focus is going to where it shouldn't go. Remember where your focus goes. Energy flows. Whatever you focus on grows. So, if you focus on things that upset you, make you feel small, make you feel weak, or otherwise make you feel flawed, you end up amplifying your negative emotions and judgments. Be careful where you invest focus. This is why it's really important to practice mindfulness. Here are some techniques that have helped me tremendously throughout the years. There's no particular order to these. Just try them all out at once, including the thought-watching technique I described previously. Pick the most effective one and stick to it. Counting your breath. The most basic way to practice mindfulness is to simply count your breath. You just need to close your eyes, find yourself in a quiet room, and just count your breath. Count the breath coming in and coming out. Eventually, you should focus your attention on the part of your nostrils that the air is coming out of. That's all you should notice. You stop focusing on the appearance of things around you. You stop paying attention to the sounds around you. You just focus on the air slowly coming in and out of your nose. This heightens your focus and awareness. A lot of people think that when they slow their minds down to a standstill that they're eventually going to fall asleep. Well, if you feel sleepy, you're doing it wrong. Believe it or not, when you're counting your breath or practicing any kind of mindfulness exercise, you're actually super aware. It's kind of like drinking 5 cups of coffee for your brain, but without the frantic nervousness. Breathe, hold, breathe. This mindfulness technique was originally formulated for U.S. Navy SEALs looking to relax during highly sensitive combat missions. If you are a SEAL team member, a lot of lives are depending on how well you do your job. It goes without saying that these guys have a lot of pressure on them. Talk about a stressful job. The breathe, hold, breathe technique enables Navy SEALs to quickly relax right before they make a very important action. Maybe they're going into a firefight. Perhaps they're about to go into the water and dive for an extended period, or possibly they're going to be doing something very sensitive involving explosives. Whatever the case may be, they need to relax so they can focus right here, right now. Most importantly, they need to relax ASAP. Breathe, hold, breathe delivers instant peace of mind guaranteed. How does it work? Breathe slowly and deeply out. Hold 4 to 8 seconds and then slowly breathe back in and hold for 4 to 8 seconds and repeat this process several times. With enough slow repetition, you feel really, really relaxed and, most importantly, you feel focused. All distractions leave you. The best part to all of this is that you can do this very quickly, and it doesn't take much time. Usually for most people, it takes anywhere from 3 to 6 repetitions to get relaxed enough so they can do what they need to do. Secular Transcendental Meditation. Transcendental meditation is somewhat controversial in some circles. A lot of people have second thoughts about this particular type of mindfulness practice. It really is too bad because transcendental meditation is one of the most powerful meditation techniques you can ever adopt if you're looking to let go of painful past memories or useless present worries or otherwise are seeking a deep reservoir of inner peace. The confusion arises from transcendental meditation's use of mantras. Mantras, after all, have historically been used by Buddhists and Hindus as part of their meditation practice. This raises a red flag to a lot of people who are looking for a mindfulness technique that is completely secular and non-religious. Well, a lot of people overlook the fact that transcendental meditation is all about using nonsense words as mantras. This is the key. In fact, if you study transcendental meditation, its teachers actively discourage people from using words that have meaning as their mantra. The whole point of transcendental meditation is for your mind to destroy thoughts. You're so focused on the present moment that you cannot even form thoughts. That's how powerful and relaxing transcendental meditation can be. By definition, it is secular, but people miss the memo on that once they hear the word mantra. All sorts of mystical imagery comes to their minds. It really is too bad because, like I said, transcendental meditation is one of the most powerful mindfulness practices out there. Here's how it works. Find a quiet room that you will not be disturbed in. Reserve that room for at least 15 minutes. Find a comfortable place to sit, and just sit. No need to assume the lotus position. No need to take a pose like some sort of Buddhist or Hindu mystic. There's no need to do that. You're not practicing yoga. You're just relaxing. Sit normally. Once you've done that, close your eyes and follow the instructions for counting your breath. You have to enter that deep level of relaxation. Once you get to that point, the next time you breathe in, say a word that doesn't have any meaning to you. You can say shoosh or something like that. It has to be a word that has absolutely no meaning. After you've done that, hold your breath for a half second so you can focus on the word that you just said and then breathe out and say the word again. Eventually, you will hit a pattern where you are paying attention to your repetitions of the mantra. If you keep this up long enough, you reach a point where you're not developing thoughts. The moment a thought starts to form, it gets destroyed by your mantra. If you keep this up long enough over an extended period of time in many practice sessions, you feel a deep, deep sense of peace and inner harmony. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's no future to worry about. All you have is the present moment. Embrace the moment. Regardless of the meditation technique or mindfulness practice you adopt, make sure they all lead to the same place. Make sure they all enable you to embrace the moment. Rediscover the eternal now. The key here is to occupy the space around you with your presence. I'm not talking about your physical presence. I'm talking about your mental presence. This is how your awareness can help you achieve greater levels of peace, serenity, and calm. When you're in this space, you appreciate it for its emptiness. You don't have to be anybody. You don't have to go anywhere. That's right. No one to be, nowhere to go. When you're able to wrap your mind around these concepts, you don't feel left behind. You don't feel like you're missing out on something. Instead, you feel complete. Operate out of freedom. If you practice the techniques above correctly and you went through the steps outlined in this training, you will learn to operate out of your mental free space. This is a tremendous process for letting go unnecessary stress and drama from your life. You no longer look at your thoughts as something you deal with, or you no longer look at your goals as something to do. Instead, You stop compartmentalizing your life and you realize that every single moment is a gift. It's an opportunity. It ties you into the eternal now, which is full of potential. Scale. In the beginning, making progress, achieving inner peace may seem like an uphill climb. This is perfectly natural. After all, you're working against your habits. This is not how your mind is normally set up. As I mentioned earlier, everything in your life is a choice. As unhealthy as your current thinking patterns may be, at the end of the day, you chose them at some point earlier in time. Now that you have adopted the practices described in this training, you are deprogramming yourself. Don't expect a lot on day 1 or even day 100. Just take it one day at a time. Eventually, as you get used to it, things will start to improve. Things get easier and easier over time. Eventually, you will be able to achieve a deep sense of inner peace. At first, this inner peace is something that you experience when you are consciously practicing mindfulness. This means you schedule a certain amount of time at a specific place when you do it. However, once it becomes second nature to you, and you know the steps like the back of your hand, you can then let your inner peace spread to other areas of your life. Please understand that the skills that you learn in managing your thoughts can apply across the board. You can apply it to your relationships, your body image, your personal ambitions and goals, and everything else. Living with integrity. Once you have achieved a tremendous amount of peace and focus thanks to the art of learning how to be quiet, you can then start to live with integrity. You know what your grand objectives are. Everything must line up to it. Otherwise, you're not living a life of integrity. The good news is when everything lines up, every day is an adventure. Every day is full of great promise. Every day can lead to happiness and joy. Please note that this happiness and joy are not something that you enjoy in the distant future or after you achieve certain things. No, you enjoy them in the here and now. From inner peace comes real confidence because everything lines up. Everything has meaning. Everything has purpose. Create an upward spiral. When you work with confidence, you become more competent. This is obvious. Why? Well, when you're confident, you try a lot more things. When you try a lot more things, sometimes you fail, sometimes you succeed, but sooner or later, you learn how to succeed more often than you fail. This then leads to greater competence because now you're able to do things the right way so you succeed more often, which then makes you feel more confident. You're able to try out more and experiment more, which leads to even greater levels of confidence, competence, and on it goes. Conclusion. Living a life of confidence and competence, thanks to the power of integrity, takes time, focus, and energy. This training lays out a solid blueprint that anybody can follow to reclaim their lives. It doesn't matter what your past looks like. It doesn't matter how small, weak, powerless, and voiceless you feel now. What matters is you are willing to tap into the power of the eternal now and the eternal present to remake your reality. If you are looking for a way out of a life of struggle, frustration, and anxiety, follow the blueprint laid out in this training. You owe it to yourself.